I'd walk into a shop and be like, here we go again. Accept in Bitcoin, and they'd be like, no, we don't accept Bitcoin. I was like, but you've got a Chivo sign up, or you've got, or you personally have a Chivo wallet. And sometimes they would lie and be like, no, we don't have a Bitcoin wallet here. Or sometimes they'd just say, I downloaded Chivo, I took the $30 off in October last year, and then I stopped using it since then. I want to become a specialist in an area, and I feel like Bitcoin is that area that will outlive us. And it'll be here in 100 years. Like when I was living in the Ivory Coast, like the first couple of times I paid a bribe on the way to work, because I basically got pulled over every day that I went into the office. If you'd asked me this a few years ago, I would have talked about some government or some like embedded sort of corruption within a country or a society or something. But now, because I've learned about Bitcoin and money and all that sort of thing, I'd say one of the biggest corruptions is...
Joe Hall is a research and interview journalist for one of the biggest crypto media companies in the world, Cointelegraph. He travels all around the world interviewing, researching and educating people on Bitcoin, and he documents this process online. In this episode, we dig into his time in El Salvador and whether or not he thinks their move to adopt Bitcoin has in fact helped the country, or whether it's made things worse. We also dig into which country he's fairly confident will adopt Bitcoin as legal tender next, given his on-the-ground research, and we touch on why dark mode on Bitcoin Lightning wallets could in fact be holding back Bitcoin adoption. All right, hey Joe, how's it going?
Hello Tats, I'm good, thanks. And just to explain why I'm wearing an oven glove. Sorry, we were joking about this before we came on air, but basically I'm in a relatively new flat, and my coffee went cold earlier because I forgot about it, so I put it in the microwave for a bit. But the handle got really hot. I don't know if you can see. So in order to drink
it looks lovely.
I've got to wear an oven glove.
Also, how much coffee are you drinking? What time is it for you at the moment?
It's 3:30. I'm in Lisbon, so it's the same time zone.
Oh, it's the same.
Yeah. It's
nice.
Another reason to love Portugal. It's same time zone, good weather. I'm in a t-shirt. I mean, you're also in a t-shirt. That's probably because you've got heating.
It's actually not. So I'm in a t-shirt because we recently moved in the sauna onto the farm where the event will be held. And so me and Dylan decided to go for a work break after lunch and hopped in the sauna for a bit to test it out, and then relax myself down, put me in a lovely mental state to come and talk to you. So I've still got a lot of heat in me from then.
Wow. Okay. Are you doing like Wim Hof stuff? So you're doing sauning and then running in the, it must be like 1 degree today or something in the UK, no?
Something like that. Yeah. It'd be nice if there was a cold dip. They did have showers, but the only mode was absolutely boiling. So I couldn't actually get in. So managed to get under briefly in the cold little bit beforehand. But yeah, so that's why I'm still in a t-shirt, because I'm still boiling.
Still steaming. Mate, get yourself an oven glove,
Yeah, no, I need a whole oven glove. All right, Joe, I'm gonna dive straight in. So you and your background, you spent a lot of time in journalism and emerging countries, and quite often in the corporate world. Mm-hmm. And it seems that you've seen a lot of corruption in a lot of these areas. And so I was wondering if you could kind of just give me an overview of the main forms or the biggest forms of corruption you've seen. And then after that, I'm going to lead kind of a little bit on to, like, you always hear like Bitcoin fixes this. So then like, what is it that Bitcoin can actually fix, and how much of it is just a part of human nature?
Okay. Wow, that is a big question to start off with, mate. What's the biggest corruption you've ever seen? I mean, inevitably,
sorry about that.
the biggest corruption, if you'd asked me this a few years ago, I would have talked about some government or some like embedded sort of corruption within a country or a society or something. But now, because I've learned about Bitcoin and money and all that sort of thing, I'd say one of the biggest corruptions is fiat money. I bet you didn't see that one coming. But in terms of, but because, fiat is this promise that our money is redeemable for a certain amount. It's a credit, and it comes with it this corrupt system in which certain people are able to advantage themselves at the behest of others. And, that's what Bitcoin fixes, doesn't it? But in terms of like what I've seen around the world, I mean, the poorer the country, this I'm going to talk in complete stereotypes and generalizations here. So trigger warning to any people that are like, oh my God, how dare you? And I've lived in lots of very poor countries and spent a lot of time there. So my way of framing things is a bit like lazy at times. So I won't be talking like, super woke Radio 4 ready English, just as like a primer.
You're excused.
Thanks, mate. But yeah, like, the poorer the country, generally, the more sort of entrenched the corruption is, to the point that it's like socially acceptable forms of corruption. Like when I was living in the Ivory Coast, like the first couple of times I paid a bribe on the way to work, because I basically got pulled over every day that I went into the office. We lived in like a expaty sort of area, and we go into Abidjan, the capital, and a policeman took a shining to me and was like, yeah, where are you going today, monsieur? Like, give me mon café today. And I was like, I'm not paying you. That's corruption. I don't have to pay you to go to work. And, the locals we were with and the people that had been in Abidjan before me were like, nah, mate, you've just got to pay this little bribe every day to get to work. And that's just how it is. And I was like, oh, okay. And so within a month, I was expensing, like literally, filing out an expense form for work to pay for my corruption sort of payment to get to work. And it was just a policeman that was sat there every morning. He saw this white guy in a shirt and a tie going to work and thought, yeah, okay, that's my little euros worth of, it was like 1000 francs, which is like 80 cents of the CFA, the local currency there. And it's just, it was expected and anticipated, and that was it. And I mean, had similar things in Mexico City, where Mexico is quite a corrupt, institutions are quite corrupt. It's quite normal just to pay your way out of situations. Like there was lots of little things, like we got caught once riding without a seatbelt on, which obviously is a stupid thing to do anyway, but we were also quite boozed. God, I hope my parents don't listen to this.
That makes it better then.
yeah, exactly, right. But again, that's one of those things that you take for granted. And I forgot that as well. Like I was in Senegal 2 weeks ago, and in the UK, the idea of getting into a car with a drunk friend would be like, what are you doing? Like, how dare you, sort of thing.
There's a brief period maybe when you've kind of passed, there's a little grey area, you're kind of all idiots. But yeah, as you're like, what you actually doing, mate? Like you kind of play it safe, like you're risking your own life or someone else's, basically.
Yeah, and you can almost sort of picture these headlines after, and also just like you get socially shamed as well. I don't know, it's equivalent to like blowing out, a cigarette in someone's face or something. It's like, what are you doing? Like that's just generally socially unacceptable now. And I just find that those rules change, because like our parents' generation, they would have drunk and drive as if it was nothing. And I know that a lot of country types still do drink a couple of pints and then drive home from the pub or whatever. The point is, I'm just trying to frame this story before I get to it. In Senegal a couple of weeks ago, we went out for a few drinks after the Bitcoin conference there. And, before we know it, we're drinking like these rum punch things and like going out to like another club, then another club. And the whole way there, we were driving with our friend who was one of the speakers at the conference, who I won't mention his name. And obviously he's smashed. He's had 4 drinks at the first bar and then a couple of drinks in the next one. And he was just driving as if it was nothing. And I reflected on the day after. I was like, wow, I just got in the car there as if it was nothing, because I'm in Senegal. Whereas if that was in, Yorkshire, where I'm from, I would never have got into that car. So it's really funny how your perspective on these things also changes, but it's also a level of corruption, right? And also just to put sort of sum up that story, we got pulled over on the way back from the club at like 3 a.m. And it was by a Senegalese police officer. And Senegal isn't as sort of corrupt as other sub-Saharan countries with sort of people in power or people in uniforms. But I was like, oh, he probably just wants a bit of money because he's stopped us and he's seen a couple of foreigners in a car on the way back from a club. And he didn't ask for any bribe or anything, and he just asked for the guy's papers, and it was a rental car. And I was like, it's so weird that he just randomly pulled us over when no one else was pulled over, and he didn't ask for a bribe thing. Like, what was he actually checking? And then when we parked up at the hotel, we realised that the front bumper of the car was just hanging off.
Oh, God.
Because basically when we parked up at the last club, it was a beach club. And for some reason, the driver really wanted to park on the beach, like literally on the sand.
Your driver.
Yeah. Is the guy he was actually the speaker at the conference.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, no, I really want to drive and literally park on the beach. And, when someone just has that idea in their head, they're just going to do it. Like, there's the car park next to the club, which isn't paved or anything. It's just like sort of dusty gravel track. And then there's the actual beach. And he drove over some rocks to get there. When I say rocks, I mean like sort of giant, sort of flat boulder slabs. And at some point during this maneuver, he must have lost the front bumper. So that was the reason why, I guess, this policeman had pulled us over.
For God's sake.
Yeah. And
that reminds me of the scene in Wolf of Wall Street when he's like, it's after like the Steve Madden phone call. He's like, Steve Madden. And he like crawls his way back into the car and he gets back and he's like, thank God I like drove home without hitting anything. He wakes up the next day. The like entire street has just been smashed by his car. And he's just got like this pile of metal that he's been driving in.
Oh my God, I need to send this to Paco. You know, Paco de la India, Run with Bitcoin.
Yeah, Run with Paco.
Yeah, because we were joking about it the next morning. That's basically what happened. Like, you know, he'd hit all these things and we had no idea because at least we hadn't taken a load of Quaaludes, you know, but we were, yeah.
Yeah, no.
So don't drink drive, kids. Sorry, do you want more serious answers to that question as well about...
Well, yeah, well, I mean, I guess this is kind of like base layer corruption that I guess a lot of people can kind of already imagine or see. Like it's all fairly, I guess, as you say, not the stereotype, but believable. Mm-hmm. And it kind of also doesn't necessarily feel that it's anything that, say, Bitcoin would fix. It's kind of just like in a place where there's not as many rules, laws, and maybe slightly poorer, that these kind of legal systems, I guess, haven't really been built up and like the social norms to follow them as much. Mm-hmm. So I guess like what are some kind of forms of corruption that you've seen that most people may not have really thought of, or that are harder to see?
Okay. I guess it's those situations where it gets higher and higher up. I mean, we saw it recently with, what's her name, the Greek MEP who was done for corruption, or she's allegedly done for a corruption scandal with FIFA. She had bags of money from Qatar at her home. You know, like we're used to seeing that sort of thing, right? Where we just assume naturally that, you know, bankers are paying off certain groups or that institutions might have a few sort of dodgy people in them who are looking to exploit their power. I think we'd like to assume that most people are generally quite good, but there's always going to be a couple of, you know, bad apples in the mix. But I mean, in Mexico City, my ex-girlfriend there, her dad was a chef at a restaurant, and he'd opened up 2 restaurants and was looking to open a third, and he wanted to sell alcohol and, you know, had to get his liquor license to do it. And the usual way you get a liquor license in Mexico City is you apply to like the local council. They come around, you pay the small fee, and then you also pay him the bribery fee, which is just, you know, an unspoken sort of truth. He did this, but he was so fed up of all the little sort of shows of corruption in Mexico City and around Mexico that he was like, no, I'm not going to pay the bribery fee. I'm going to take this to the highest level and to make sure that I actually do this by the book this time, because I'm fed up of paying these little fees for things that are just, you know, people taking the cream off the top for themselves. And so he went from the local council to like this, like Mexico City's like 27 million people. It's like a massive city. So he went from like his small council to like a slightly larger area, and eventually to Mexico City, and then eventually to, because every time the minister or this official came round, they wanted the bribe, and he was like, no. And so he went to the superior and eventually superior. And so 2 years later, literally, he's been trying to get this liquor license for 2 years. So his restaurant in Mexico City is not serving alcohol, but it is serving, you know, tacos and chapulines and everything else. It's not serving alcohol. So he's made a loss because of his scruples and because he wants to stand up for his principles. And he gets higher and higher and higher until eventually he's basically with the minister for food and beverages in Mexico, like the national minister. And so he gets to the office and he gets invited in. And he's a bit nervous and a bit sort of shaken up by it, because it's quite intimidating when you go to these governmental buildings and there's a lot of security, and you know, they search you on the way.
And all he wants is a liquor license.
Yeah, for actually a really bloody good restaurant. It's called Las Polas. If you're ever in Mexico City, there's now 4 of them.
Noted.
Shout out. Yeah, he gets in there and he explains the whole story of why he's there and the reason why he wanted to, you know, bring it up with the minister. And the minister's like, gosh, that is, you know, really heartwarming stuff. And I'm really sorry that the state of the country is like that. And like eventually puts the contract in front of him and says, yeah, you know, sign here. And, you know, he lets out this big sigh of relief. He's like, great, finally get my liquor contract. And then the minister's like, and there'll also be the 250 for me. And it's like, what? Like, nobody is not corrupt
crazy.
up the chain. And it's one of those things that it's really hard to visualize if you haven't grown up in that sort of society, because you don't realize that even the state, when it's mandating salaries for these people, it knows that they will get a certain amount of money from corruption or from bribes anyway. So why do you need to give them a pay rise, for example? Let's say we've got the nurses strike at the moment, or the train strikes at the moment in the UK. The government would budget for, train drivers next year, like normal amount of salary, and should we put it up 5 or 10% to match inflation this year? Well, they've actually taken quite a few bribes, as we can see from this guy buying new cars, this guy getting a new house, whatever it is. So maybe we don't need to factor it in.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's basically, you've got corruption on every single level of power there, pretty much. And so no matter how much you want to do good as a small individual business owner, there's not really any way you can. I mean, is this something that you see, like, that feels like almost so entrenched that to think of that not being there almost seems unimaginable. I mean, there's certain levels of corruption here as well, and I guess like certain things which are so system based, kind of like the police system, and then we can kind of delve into like the fiat system as well. They almost feel so entrenched that it's like, how does that ever even change?
Yeah, it's almost like, do we need that generation that's grown up with that amount of corruption to effectively die out, because it's really hard to change human behaviors, right? Even, I mean, when I think about my parents' approach to technologies and things, they've still been around an iPhone for 10 years now, but they struggle to do a screenshot or a screen record. So how can we realistically change someone's behavior when they've been around for 60, 70, 80 years with regards to corruption? They're just used to it, and it's become like a reflex almost. I think that, to some extent, those systems won't ever be, or unless you change rule of law, right? I mean, we're seeing that with places like El Salvador. Actually, that's quite a good counter argument. Nayib Bukele's cleaned up gangs within a year. And I guess one of the things within that is corruption, right? Because, gangs are also an example of corruption because of their ability to create rackets and, extort people of money. So maybe there is a way out of these systems too, but it requires a huge response, because, you need to know that your actions will be punished if you, say, break the law. I mean, we saw it with Singapore as well, didn't we? So I guess there are, little pockets of, I don't know if progress is the right word, because lots of people have a lot of issue with these approaches to change, don't they? Like Bukele's been absolutely murdered in the mainstream media because he's effectively locked up people without due course or due recourse. But when you see the situation on the ground and you realise how desperate things are, you really start to understand why these things have happened. And I'm not like some authoritarian, dictator supporter or whatever. And I don't, think that Bukele is the best, this messiah that everyone's making him out to be. But when you see the results and you speak to people, like recently I spent a couple of hours on the streets of El Salvador just chatting to people, being like, if you could sum up the environment in El Salvador, what now? Like, what would you say? And like about 39 people out of the 40 I spoke to said words like peace or happiness or hope. And I was just like, wow, like, can you imagine asking people in the streets of the UK how they'd sum up the atmosphere right now in the UK?
Tragic.
Yeah.
Tragic.
It would be just abominable, wouldn't it? It would make for good content, but it was, and I'd never been I've been in lots of countries where there is this sort of sense of hope about the future, but in El Salvador it felt quite tangible and quite, and it was quite moving. And even when I asked them about, actually one person did say crime, which I thought was quite interesting. I'm actually going to upload this video in the next day or two. And the other thing was, I asked them their opinion of Bukele as well, and no one had a bad thing to say about him. They were all like, this is the most amazing leader. And again, when you contrast that to our experience in like Europe or America or wherever it is in the West, how do we view our leaders right now? Like we view them as these annoying pests that no one.
Yeah, we throw them out every few weeks and try and find a new one.
Yeah, and there's no accountability with them either. Is because they get away with murder, because that's our corruption, isn't it? Like Boris Johnson can throw parties during his premiership and not be punished for it, or they can give out NHS contracts to people which clearly are corrupt contracts, and they can also get away with it. So yeah, it's I guess that's one way of improving the situation. But I'm not one of those guys that subscribes to the Bitcoin fixes everything camp. And I like to tease that sometimes on Twitter. I'll put up tweets like, I just crashed into a car on the way to work. Bitcoin doesn't fix
Bitcoin
this.
fixes this.
Yeah. Or like, Bitcoin doesn't fix this. And some smart ass every time will be like, actually, had you not been rushing because you'd lowered your time preference because, you realized that you're going to be on the server for 80 years, then Bitcoin does fix this. And,
That's quite funny.
Yeah, literally every time. Like, one last week was like, Atlantic storms have knocked out electricity in my street or something.
Yeah.
Bitcoin doesn't fix this. And they're like, actually, in the future, there'll be nuclear reactors in every house. So Bitcoin does fix this. And I was like, mate.
Have a laugh.
Yeah, exactly. But it's Twitter, though, isn't it? It's the medium, not the message.
Yeah, no, definitely. I want to kind of come back to Naib a little bit then, because I mean, with Naib, he's an interesting, and El Salvador as a whole is an interesting topic because everything is either like, oh, El Salvador adopted Bitcoin, GDP's up like X amount, all this, all that, like it's like super, super good. And then on the other hand, they're like, Shiva wallet is like awful. It's like no one uses it. It's kind of like all this kind of stuff. And then you also get like around Naib as well. Like he's like I admire aspects about him, but then I don't know the recent thing like he's extending like the amount of time he can stay in power or like these little things. And I kind of what are your kind of views on that, and what do you think people are getting wrong and people are getting right? Because I mean you've obviously been there.
Good question. It's a weird one, right? Because, like, I mean, you care about Bitcoin and the future of Bitcoin, right? So because it's the first country that's adopted Bitcoin, I want to see them succeed. I'm cheering them on, but I also believe in the truth, and I feel like if we don't tell the truth about the matter, then we'll get ourselves into really deep water. And there's also a lot of learning that we can do from El Salvador's experience, because inevitably other countries will adopt Bitcoin. I mean, there's going to be 4 countries next year that adopt Bitcoin. I mean, we should start putting bets, to be honest. It's going to be quite an interesting, Bitcoin country casino, or Bitcoin country bingo.
That should be on some betting sites. Start that.
My money's on Mali, by the way. Mali and then Tonga. Sorry, not Tonga. Did I say? Did I mean Tonga? Yeah, I do mean Tonga. Yeah.
Interesting. I'll ask you why that is afterwards, but okay. I'll let you carry on with this one now.
Yeah, so the Bukele thing. Yeah, so there's the Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert camp, which is this country is infallible. We must do everything we can to support it, and they are the gatekeepers of El Salvador. They are completely hell-bent on making sure shitcoin people, shitcoin companies don't get set a foot in El Salvador, and they're doing everything they can to make it the sort of Bitcoin citadel country, so that Bitcoin is all over the world. Come there, invest, spend money, and let the sats flow in this country. And then there's the other end of the spectrum, which is your Bloombergs and your the Guardian, which say Bitcoin's price has gone down 70% over the past year. Therefore, El Salvador people are even poorer than they started. And obviously, that's just not correct reporting. So it's actually really hard to find the truth of El Salvador, and also the truth knowing that what is El Salvador? I've never even been to this country before. I've lived a little bit in Latin America, but every one of these countries has their own sort of histories, and there's a lot going on there that's just beneath the surface. And I found it fascinating just learning about El Salvador and its treatment in the press. The fact that most of the media in El Salvador is actually controlled by this sort of legacy family. And El Faro is like one of the main voices in his lighthouse, and they're the guys that have been sort of slamming Bukele whenever they can, despite the fact that he has a 90% approval rating. So most dictators would die for a 90% approval rating, let alone a centrist in some.
And that's usually done through the media being in support of them, not against them.
Exactly, and I mean maybe that's also a vote in favour of social media, and the fact that Bukele is a prolific, Twitter and Facebook sort of influencer as well within the country. He knows that that's how you get the message across to people, because most Salvadorians have a smartphone and they're on social media in some shape or form. I went there with this expectation that I'd be able to live off Bitcoin, that everyone would understand Bitcoin, and that spending Bitcoin at McDonald's to pupusa places to surf rentals to car hires would be straightforward. And the reality was it was really, really hard and really quite tiring. I mean, I was traveling with Sophie, my partner, and once we left El Salvador, she was like, God, I'm so glad we're not there anymore. And I was like, why? It's like, you were so stressed trying to spend Bitcoin wherever you went. And I was like, oh shit. I didn't, I didn't really. And she was like, you genuinely were, like, because I'd walk into a shop and be like, here we go again. I said, then Bitcoin, and they'd be like, no, we don't accept Bitcoin. I was like, oh, but you've got a Chivo sign up, or you've got, or you personally have a Chivo wallet, and sometimes they would lie and be like, no, we don't have a Bitcoin wallet here, or sometimes they'll just say, oh, I downloaded Chivo, I took the $30 off in October last year, and then I stopped using it since then. And I would do like the fake thing of being like, oh, I'm going to walk out your shop then, I'm not going to spend my Bitcoin here. And
Stropping, basically.
Yeah. I'd learned this from Ricky, who's an Italian. Do you know Laura and Ricky? They've got like a Bitcoin podcast. He used to work as a human rights activist, like around Africa, and he's a guy that does not give a. I can swear on this. Like he does not give a fuck. And can I swear on this?
Yeah, I guess you can now.
Sorry. Whoops. Yeah, does not care, and he's a little bit older, and he's been writing really like hard-hitting articles for people like Bitcoin Magazine as well as his own platforms. And he said to me that when he first went to El Salvador, like 2 months after the Bitcoin law, he spent a lot of time sort of educating people about accepting Bitcoin, and they were quite happy to hear from him. And then this time around, sort of autumn time this year, a lot of people have lost interest, or they're just not as phased as they used to be. And large part of that is, of course, because the price is a lot lower, but also it's because there's been a real failing from insert whoever you want to blame here regarding education. Like there's no financial education, there's no maths education, of course there's no Bitcoin education, and you can't really get to a Bitcoin education without being able to have a basic understanding of maths. And from then, financial education. I mean, if people aren't saving money, then how are they going to know to save Satoshis? There's a big leap to get there. And a lot of people, I think, just assumed, and myself included, that El Salvadorians would suddenly be like, a little bit orange pilled before we got there. But I was actually explaining to people how to use Bitcoin, why I use Bitcoin, and then, tipping them handsomely in Bitcoin. And 9 times out of 10, and I've actually recorded a lot of these reactions, people are like, thank you so much for taking the time to explain to me how this all works. And I was like, well, of course, like, it's the smallest thing. And they'd be like, you're the first person who's ever just like sat me down and had a 5-minute chat about like the Lightning Network, or about, why base chain takes roughly 10 minutes or whatever it is, like some, not even like a deep level understanding of Bitcoin. We're not going to Merkle trees or,
more like how to drive a car, basically, instead of knowing how the engine works, how many pistons it's got. It's just like, where's the accelerator, where's the brake, where's the steering wheel, what do I do with it, kind of thing.
This is a great metaphor or allegory, whatever it is, and I will use that and steal it, because a lot of people, just to continue on with that idea, a lot of people will want to know how an internal combustion engine works, and will want to know why the electrics on the windows don't work if you're in like high winds or something, whereas most people just want to turn the car on and drive fast, or drive from A to B. And that's kind of what you see in the Bitcoin world, isn't it? And some people are there being like, but is there even a car at all? Is it all just an illusion? Is the car just a useful abstraction from our realities? Or they'll be like the real, like,
well, you can't sit in it and you can't drive it, but you can use it.
There you go. It's but yeah, I'm just making a dig at all those sort of, these sort of intellectual masturbation podcasts that you get a lot of in Bitcoin. Like, isn't this a useful?
You get quite philosophical.
Yeah, I'm just being cheeky. But yeah, if anyone's listening and they're considering going to El Salvador, just bloody do it. Just go. I've never been in a country where I've been so warmly welcomed by people. Literally had people walk up to me on the street, shake my hand, and say,
"Is that just because of your hair, though?"
I'll take it. No, I mean, well, no, it can't have been that. I don't know why I was entertaining the idea. People literally would shake my hand on the street and be like, "Thank you for coming to my country." And for them,
really,
yeah,
wow, nothing to do with Bitcoin, purely just because they like to see tourism.
Yeah, and I stick out like a sore thumb in lots of Latin American countries, and a lot of time was with Sophie, and she's quite blonde, so like looks very foreign. And so like when we were up around the sort of Santa Ana, around the sort of, it's like El Salvador's second city. It's slightly less touristy, but it's where all the volcanoes are, and it's like a beautiful place for like sunsets and rainbows, and just seeing hiking, that sort of thing. People literally shook my hand and said, bienvenido, like welcome and thank you for visiting. And I was like, are you a tour guide? Are you like the host? What's going on here? And you're just a random person in the street. They're just happy to see tourists, because for them, tourists coming to the country, a lot of these guys are a bit older as well, like maybe like 40s, 50s. And maybe it just meant that, okay, like the country's on a good path again. We're seeing tourists. That means money's coming in. That means our quality of life is improving or has improved, and we are safe again. Because 3 or 4 years ago, it was or at least the reports say it was a gang stricken country, and a lot of people now feel a lot safer. And it's really hard to put like a price or a value on that level of security that has been won in the past sort of couple of years. I mean, a lot of people were saying, like, to me when I was walking through the streets for San Salvador, asking them like, what's the vibe like in the city? And they're like, I wouldn't let my kids go out when the sun went down, and now we're having this conversation and the sun has already set. So I know, I mean, I'm not very good at empathy anyway, and it's something I really try to work on. But like, just imagine putting yourself in those shoes and being, spending 3 or 4 years knowing that you've got to get your stuff done in the daytime, because nighttime equals danger, it equals crime, it equals, you can't go out at night, you can't socialize, you can't have parties, you can't do all those things that we all take for granted. And suddenly you're able to do this again. And like, how magical is that? Man, I really wish I'd showed the video of El Salvador before this chat, because I think I do like try to sum up the vibe a little bit. But there's one conversation I'm having with this old dude, and he speaks quite good English, because I tried to speak English when I could, just because a lot of the audience is English. And like randomly, music started playing at the end of his like sentence, and like a random like live band just popped up, and then there's people salsa dancing next to me, and I was just this is so cool. Like, it's just. Yeah, so go to El Salvador if you can. Or if you have the means, if you're able to, if you're able to get the time off work, all those sort of things. But yeah, if you can, do it.
Sounds amazing. So I guess it's almost like the difference between war and peace, basically. I mean, war, you can't really go outside. It might be not necessarily a war with another country, but a war with itself kind of thing. And then to kind of have that gone, you have this, I guess you have this time of peace, and you're just happy to see things working again, people actually wanting to come. And yeah, it must be amazing seeing your kids, or being able to be happy to have your kids go outside again and not worry about that.
Yeah, it's mad. And I've not really experienced that in a place. I've not been to places that have come out of a war. Maybe it's like being in a Mali or something.
Not yet.
Or something. I don't know.
We'll see how the next 10 years play out.
Yeah, I mean, if Bitcoin moons, or when Bitcoin moons, he'll be hailed as the brightest person in the world. And actually, Mike Peterson, the founder of Bitcoin Beach, I was like, what happens if will the media ever change its tune regarding El Salvador? Because you literally cannot find a positive mainstream media article about El Salvador, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. I'm not getting conspiratorial or anything. I'm just saying, the atmosphere on the ground is completely different to what you read in the press. And I mean, Sophie's parents were reluctant to let her go there, and we lied for the first bit and said that we were in LA in California rather than going to El Salvador.
Wow.
And then like sent a picture from Bitcoin Beach being like, oh, we came.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, getting abducted.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I slipped, and now I'm kidnapped. But oh shit, what was my point?
I don't think you're getting conspiratorial.
Constipated. All the constipated theorists.
Yeah, constipated theorists. Because then this is one of the things that you kind of realize when you look more into a specific subject. Let's Bitcoin for this example, is that you do kind of realize the narrative with the mainstream media and kind of what the general population believes and are told, compared to like what's actually going on. Like, the disparity is huge, and it does make you think, if that's the disparity between this thing, and I can see it's so large, and it's only because I understand it, how many other things are there which are also have this huge discrepancy, purely because you don't really actually understand it, so you kind of just take all these headlines at face value. So I think it's a valid idea. And I mean, so then TLDR, basically good and bad, but the kind of the feel in El Salvador is actually amazing, and it has made a huge difference.
Oh yeah, I mean, I I was trying to load this question when I asked people because I think the gist of what's going on in El Salvador is there's a Bukele revolution. It's not like a Bitcoin revolution. And so I asked everyone, like I just asked random people as well as sort of more informed. Like there's a lot of, hang on, let me try again. Basically, I think there's either a Bitcoin or there's a Bukele revolution taking place in El Salvador. And so I asked people on the street this question. And I also asked people that were sort of had established or like respected jobs in government or like business owners, that sort of thing. And
in El Salvador.
In El Salvador, yeah, because I was filming a documentary while I was there as well, which will probably come out in like March or something. But
look forward to it.
Yeah, well, we'll see, because I don't know the first thing about making documentaries, so who knows?
I look forward to it even more.
Yeah, it's going to be an absolute shit show, mate. But watch it anyway. But the funny thing about the sort of higher echelons of society, if I can say that, is that there's actually a lot of people that are returning to El Salvador that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they left because their family was persecuted and they effectively became refugees. That the former regime didn't like the father's job, and so the son left and went to Spain or the US or to the UK or something to find work there. And now they're realizing that the country's safer, the old regime is out, and you can come to El Salvador and you can actually prosper, you can actually find jobs, and you can find a valid way of contributing to your country and your home turf. And I never experienced this sort of phrase before or learned of it, but it's called a brain gain. We've got a brain drain, for example, in the UK at the moment, because lots of our talent is like leaving to go abroad. And in El Salvador, they've got this brain gain or a brain boomerang. There's people coming back to the country because they've realised that they can actually build a future for themselves and their families there. So that was really cool to see. But then with regards to this Bukele or Bitcoin revolution, I think obviously Bukele, it's very clear that he is a Bitcoiner. He really cares about the future of that currency, and it's mental to think that he adopted Bitcoin in his country so early on, when, let's be honest, Bitcoin isn't a very good medium of exchange because of its volatility. One day it's worth 70 grand and the next day it's worth 15 grand. But I think he did that knowing that in tapping into Bitcoin, he would tap into this huge community, he would tap into these wealthy individuals, and he would bring a lot of sort of Western voices to El Salvador, which would be to the benefit of his country. So I think this guy is like a very, very smart guy, and he's not to be underestimated because, he's got this strategy, he's got this game plan, and he's executing it. And yes, Bitcoin is one of the tenets of that philosophy, but it's not like the only one. He's doing lots of other things as well, and it's not like Bitcoin is. If it was as important as he makes it appear, then why is Chivo so shit? And why is no one actually using it as a means of exchange? And why is that no one was properly educated about how to use Bitcoin effectively? It's more of a marketing tool, I think, right now, and it's a bloody good one because the figures speak for themselves. Whether it's tourism or GDP or I don't know, safety or crime, or every metric in El Salvador seems to be doing really, really well. Okay, maybe you can't trust all the figures, but then I went there and I also thought it's a country that's really experiencing dramatic fundamental change, and that's really cool to see and be part of. Like when you're in those places like that, it's fun.
Definitely. It's kind of like, I guess, the last, call it, let's just say 10, 12 years of kind of Bitcoin growing bigger and bigger. You've kind of got more and more people coming in, more and more money, kind of accumulating. It's kind of like building this massive wooden pole. And then Bukele just saw that pole and he's like, that would make a really good spear. Like, fashions like a nice little point, puts it on this pole, and then you can kind of harness this massive pole, this Bitcoin energy, to then drive in money to the country, boost tourism, all this kind of thing. Yeah, it's cool.
I preferred your car analogy. I'm going to have to be honest with that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to try again. Pushing it there a little bit.
Spear, I think it was the
just a broom.
He's sweeping those sats,
getting rid of the gangs.
Yeah.
So moving on, I want to kind of come back to then the two countries that you suspected would be the next to adopt it. You spend a lot of time in these kind of more developing countries, helping educate and those kind of things. So I want two questions. First, like, because I'm aware that there's obviously adoption going in. You hear like Nigeria's got X amount of adoption, but what are most people not grasping or not understanding? What is something that might be misunderstood about the adoption in these countries? And then why are you so confident that another country, or say even four, will adopt it as their legal tender next year?
Let's go 5, actually, because I think that once a couple of these dominoes fall in certain regions, the others will quickly follow suit. First point about what people misunderstanding about adoption in these countries. I mean, when we read stuff on Twitter or in sort of Bitcoin echo chambers, it's lauded and exalted as, oh my god, like look at the adoption in Africa right now. I feel like the past month the buzzword has been like Bitcoin in Africa, and people are saying like, oh, everyone's sleeping on Bitcoin in Africa, and it's like, well, yes, there's some fucking cool things happening, like Fedimint, for example. I think that is actually a game changer. And speaking to Obi and knowing what I mean, I think his potential. He's like the Steve Jobs of like the Bitcoin world. I think that he will project or catalyze Bitcoin to the stratosphere because of Fedimint and the way in which it sort of solves the custodying issue. And for those that aren't familiar with Fedimint, basically the idea is that rather than you looking after your Bitcoin keys, your private keys yourself, you basically have a load of community, what are they called, fellows or leaders or something? Community leaders?
Yeah, kind of little groups, kind of like,
Yeah.
I guess, clans, kind of. You
Yeah.
have your like certain clan leaders who are like, who cannot control it, but you could say, unless, I don't know, your brother, your mother, and your father as people you want to help keep your keys, something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like trusted community leaders or something, and they have your coins under multi-sig. So you can spend your money, you can send messages, you can talk within the communities that you're in. And it might be, say, someone at your school and the local fireman and your mum and your dad or something. But if there's no sort of ownership on you having to look after your keys at home. And I know this goes a lot against the Bitcoin ethos of like self-sovereignty and stuff, but the idea came from a guy that ran an exchange for 7 or 8 years. Obi ran CoinFloor, which then became Coin Corner because the Coin Corner bought it out. And these solutions, he spent a lot of time thinking about them and a lot of time implementing them. And there's already been a huge uptick from them. And I think that will get us closer to seeing 1 billion people adopt Bitcoin. So that's like one thing that will absolutely take off in Africa, and I'm really excited about, because in Africa there's so many horrible colonial currencies that are basically like slavery currencies that need to be gotten rid of, and I see Bitcoin as a way of getting out of that. The other thing is mining and what that means for energy sovereignty and energy security in Africa, because a lot of projects in Africa generally tend to be white elephants. Like a huge amount of money gets injected into, say, Burkina Faso or Togo, and suddenly a government is like, oh god, we need to make use of this money straight away, so let's build the world's biggest cathedral, and let's build this giant cocoa plantation, and then other little bits and pieces, and in 10 years they're left empty. And I mean, I saw a lot of these white projects while living in Africa. There's a place called Yamoussoukro, which was the former capital of the Ivory Coast, and there's the world's biggest basilisk. Wait, what's the snake in
That's
Harry
a
Potter?
basilisk fang is like the thing in Chamber of Secrets.
I was going to say, which one's the parcel tongue thing? Which one's basilic? What's it called?
Basilic. What actually is it?
Let me. Oh shit! Currently embarrassing himself in a podcast. Great. Yamoussoukro Cathedral, Basilica. Oh my god,
Basilica.
I was so out. Basilisk. Yeah, this guy's a journalist. Ooh, trust him. Oh shit! Basilica of Our Lady of Peace. I think it's the biggest basilica in the world. And I went there, and there's no one visiting it. Like most cathedrals in most places around the world, there's flocks of tourists taking pictures there. We drove up there on a scooter, parked up, and just ended up like, I don't know, sort of playing around, like shouting at each other, doing like echo and stuff across these huge, like monumental halls.
Deserted.
Completely deserted, yeah. And there were 5-lane roadways, like 5-lane motorways, and there'd be like one car going on like one of the lanes, because they got given all this money, all this aid, or they discovered all this resource, and like, okay, where do we inject it straight away to make use of it? And I think that this is in relation to energy security, because sometimes they'll make like a huge dam, for example, which will supply energy to like 1,000 homes. when in reality it would be so much cooler if they could do lots of smaller projects and electrify more and more areas or villages or whatever, and do that with something like Bitcoin, which makes those projects a bit more feasible. Because obviously, if you've got an energy source that's untapped and you've got people that want that energy source, then initially it's like, oh, we need to bid for that. How are we going to get the funding for it? But if you've got that energy source as well as Bitcoin mining, then suddenly the whole project becomes a lot more profitable, and getting that project greenlit is a lot easier. So I think that's another thing that in Africa will absolutely explode. But you've also got huge barriers, which are education, because I mean, who is learning about Bitcoin in, I don't know, Cameroon, in the local language, local dialect? You know, they probably don't speak very good French, despite it being the local language. They definitely don't speak English. And so, what Bitcoin resources are there in the actual local language? And there's what, 20,000 languages across Africa. I mean, at the Senegal conference I was at recently, the most of the talks were in Wolof, which is the local language, and I was so pleased to see this. And they had so much better attendance than the talks that were in French, or my talks, unfortunately, which were in English. But wasn't that great to see? You know, because that shows that there's a clear need for these educational tools or just resources in those local languages. So yeah, that's a barrier. And then on top of that, the other barrier is internet infrastructure generally. Like, yes, you can send sats over SMS services, thanks to Machankura, you know, the South African sort of innovation, where you can basically text people Bitcoin. But there still needs to be better internet, if not for all of the Africans using Bitcoin, then just for me, because when I do videos, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'll send you some sats. And then like it becomes 2G internet and it doesn't quite kick in. And I'm there like, I promise you the Lightning Network is instant. And they're like, no, it's not, mate. Like, this is the slowest thing. So I think that, yeah, it's good to frame the news that's been coming out of Africa. You know, Jack Dorsey was there, Jack Mallers was there, and there's loads of announcements from Afro Bitcoin, you know, the Ghana conference. But in reality, you talk to the average African about Bitcoin, and they probably think it's a scam, or they probably think it's a Ponzi scheme, or whatever it is, because the infiltration of scams and things in Africa is so much more prolific than we experienced in the Western world. So yeah, that's probably the third barrier, isn't it? You know, there's a lot of issues with that. I'm sorry, I rambled on there a bit, didn't I?
No, not at all. You had a lot of interesting points. I mean, to kind of go through all that, like the not your keys, not your coins thing. I know it's like, oh, everyone like has to kind of do this, but like it is a pain. Like it is just inconvenient, and there is always like, I'm still trying to work out what's the best security way of actually storing your keys. Because obviously you can have multi-sig, and so then do you use something like Casa, and kind of try and spread out the locations? Because like even if you have like a bunch of things, if someone comes to your house, they're like, give me your Bitcoin, and it's still possible for them. It's like you've done all that work, and someone can still potentially steal your Bitcoin. And so I think, yeah, if you can entrust more of a community or people you trust to kind of spread out and decentralize the security for your coins, yeah, super cool idea.
Nice way of looking at it, decentralizing the security of your coins. Yeah, I just think that, you know, we can barely expect people to look after their passwords to get into their email addresses or their keys to their homes or whatever it is. So I know that people say, oh, it's only 12 words, you just got to remember it or whatever. But I mean, I've woken up lots of evenings in a sweat and been like, oh my God, shit, like, where's my seed phrase? Or like, you know, oh my God, have I like dropped my Trezor somewhere or whatever it might be? And yeah, it's, I mean, now I'm completely used to it, but it's been a few years of that and, you know, the inevitable stresses. And I know that, I mean, even like when my brother, I got him a ledger for Christmas 2 years ago. I was like, you know, take your Bitcoin off whatever exchange you're keeping it on. And he's a really smart guy, you know. He went to Cambridge University and like really bright, like consults for the government. And he was, you know, shitting his pants about using you know, sorting out a seed phrase. And so I was, you know, how are we going to get everyone in the world to take custody of their keys? It's a big question. And I think having more and more solutions, which aren't quite as, I don't want to say difficult, because I know it's not difficult, but you know what I mean? It's like that stress factor.
Inconvenient.
Yeah, inconvenient, yeah. I know that people are like, oh, it's because you've been conditioned by the fiat mindset and the fiat money of not having, you know, accountability for your actions. But it's just stressful, isn't it? You know, I mean, a lot of people I know just put their seed phrase on a metal plate and bury it in their garden. And I think that's probably the best way of, you know, getting peace of mind. I personally use multi-sig because I know that I'm probably going to lose something at some point because I'm always losing stuff. And then the next question is inheritance. What do you do for that? And I recently learned that splitting up your seed phrase and giving it to various family members is not a good thing, because apparently if you've got a few of the words of a seed phrase, then you can brute force the seed phrase. So I quickly had to take back my seed phrase from family members. Apparently the best thing to do, or one of the best things to do, because there is no best way of doing things in Bitcoin because you've got to not trust verify and do it all yourself, is that you use a kill switch. Oh, no, sorry, a dead man switch. A kill switch is something else. Where you have an email set up that every 6 months, if you don't reply to that email or whatever, then it sends out instructions of how to access your Bitcoin.
That's smart. Haven't come across that.
Obviously, I haven't set it up, but I just
nice idea. Well, I mean, it kind of comes back. I think safety in the fiat standard, he does go on about, it's completely unrealistic that, one, everyone's going to self-custody, two, everyone's going to use the base layer Bitcoin chain. Like, realistically, once again, it's this layers kind of thing, and it depends. It's more just choosing someone to entrust with the security so that you can get on with your life. Like, I trust Chrome a fair amount. Like, I know there's certain privacy issues, but it's quite simply easy to just use your Google account to log into things. You don't have to think about things and constantly kind of reset passwords. Okay, so then coming back, so going on a bit of a tangent. So I kind of want to come on to the Lightning Network now, because I don't think I know anyone who uses it more than you.
I do use it a lot, actually.
You do use it a lot. However, you still see a lot of criticism surrounding it. Let's just say Eric Wolf or someone will always post something and be like, oh, I just got this new phone, trying to set up a Lightning wallet, but like it just doesn't work. We can't do it. Like, am I the only one, kind of thing?
Yeah.
And there's also the things that, like, some people will say that the apps, like I think one person was saying that Mun, which is a Lightning wallet, doesn't actually use Lightning yet to send the Lightning. So what are your thoughts on how true some of those criticisms are, and what are the biggest shortfalls?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Lightning Network isn't where it needs to be, first up. And while I use it the whole time, and I think it's bloody great, it has got issues, and there's a lot of people working really hard on resolving those issues, and there's some really fucking bright people coming into the space because of the Lightning Network. So I think it even has sort of secondary or ulterior sort of positive consequences of being introduced to the Bitcoin system. I mean, take people like Carle BTC. He recently did an AMA on Stacker News where he talked about the Lightning Network, and he wasn't really into Bitcoin before Lightning, because there's also the fact that you can build on Lightning and make apps, or I guess dApps in a way, like LNbits or other Bolt sort of friendly systems that you can use and build on. I'm not a developer, and I think it probably shows right now. But
there's a lot of these cool little things, like Keat is another one, like Hole Punch.
That's completely different though.
Is that completely different?
That's just peer to peer. Yeah, I mean, we could be having this. I actually used Keat quite a lot now, and it's actually really good. It's better quality.
Yeah, I use it occasionally as well, but I wasn't sure because it kind of I think it mentions Lightning somewhere, and I was like, how does this actually work?
Oh right, I don't know. That would be a cool integration though. But yeah, that's just peer to peer. So like we basically become our own
Zion
server.
Justin Rezvani.
Oh, I saw the video of that yesterday. I don't know what's really going on with it, but yeah, as we've pointed out, there's a lot of stuff going on because of Lightning. So I think we're just scratching the surface with payments, which is like my favorite thing to do with it. Just send money around the world, demo that it works the whole time. With Eric Wall, and it's funny you bring him up because I bumped into him in Switzerland recently, and I was like, mate, I know you love to slam the Lightning Network, so let me just buy you lunch over Lightning. And I did. I bought him a pizza over Lightning. Sorry, someone's calling me. Obviously, whenever you do a demonstration and whenever you want to make a point with Bitcoin, it will rug you in some way. Yeah. So I scanned the invoice and I sent it, and that thing of saying payment is in transit, meaning that's sent behind the scenes somewhere, but they didn't get the notification and you didn't get the notification, and then 30 seconds later it actually arrived, and I was like, for fuck's sake, this is just typical from the Lightning Network, whatever it is. I think there's a lot of issues with wallets themselves. For example, Blue Wallet, over a certain amount, it charges you 1% which is extortionate. That's the same as Visa or MasterCard. And I found that out the hard way recently when I sent a payment of like $150 and paid over $1.50 in fees. So there's lots of sort of UX issues that definitely could be ironed out. There's lots of sort of liquidity challenges, which are like great big maths problems, which a lot of these developers like to dig into, which could also be ironed out. But I think the fact that you've already got 5,000 Bitcoin locked up in liquidity, and you've got people like me who are obsessing over it and are using it the whole time. And I always think that, when I'm doing something, there's got to be 1,000 of me out there who are also doing similar things or more. So I think, it's still quite early, but I would have liked to see the Lightning Network be a bit further on and people be using it more. But it's also swimming against like the strongest current, which is the fact that Bitcoin is super volatile, and the Lightning Network is initially supposed to be like this payments network. And who is realistically paying for stuff with Bitcoin? It must be like 0.01% of the total users. Who is actually using services like Bitrefill over Lightning, or paying for their phone credit over Lightning, or paying for their lunch over Lightning, like I am, and doing these sorts of things. So I think it should get criticism, and it needs more good criticism. But a lot of the usual critics are just like lazy, sort of half-assed. Oh, the UX is a bit rubbish. It's like, well, I'm glad you flagged that, but it's not the Lightning Network that's at fault there. That's the developer of the app. And I mean, I detailed a lot of these things inadvertently while I was in El Salvador, because I was using various wallet apps, and I found that people were commenting on the videos that I uploaded saying, I didn't realize you couldn't see that. I mean, a really big, like, flagrant example is Strike. So Strike's app, which I don't actually have because it's mostly for US or Latin American people, their app is hard coded into dark mode. And I think that's fascinating, because you're trying to use an app that's in dark mode in really, really sunny places like El Salvador, Guatemala. And on top of this, like El Salvador, Guatemala, like a lot of the people that live there are farmers. And so they'll be, and their central heating or their way of cooking will be an open fire in like a house. And so inevitably there's a lot of smoke that comes off this fire, and they go to sleep in these rooms. And so their eyesight tends to be really quite crappy, but particularly towards the end of their lives, because their eyes just deteriorate because of the smoke. So you've got farmers using this app, which is hard coded to be dark in a really bright country, where the sun's shining quite intensely, and they've got bad eyesight. Clearly the developers have not at all thought about what it must mean to be a Salvadorian farmer when they were coding up this app. So there's a lot of these sort of UX issues where they should have made it brighter, they should have made it easier to use, less text, more emojis, more not numbers, being more like buy is like a giant, bright green button, and exchange is like a giant orange one, or whatever it is, just to make it so that, okay, what is the user in this country? What is their actual lived experience, and how can we make it easier to transact with? So there's a load of stuff going on here, but inevitably in the Bitcoin space, you've got a lot of sort of Westerners approaching these problems for solutions that will inevitably be used in the developing world. Well, I think what I just said there was quite meaningful.
Oh yeah, no, that was really interesting, because I mean, also like the kind of people that Bitcoin, a lot of people track, especially the developer side, are like fairly geeky, super techy, and like all the people I know who really love coding and this kind of thing, they're obsessed with dark mode. Like they just love dark mode. They love dark mode on everything. Like, first thing they're like, oh, like how can I turn this into dark mode? And then apart from that, it's also like, oh, this is cool. How can I add this kind of thing? Yeah. So it's always like adding cool features, like, oh mate, look at this button. Like if I do this, like it will spin around or something. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes it's probably quite easy to get sidetracked and be like, what is actually the easiest thing that you can possibly use? Yeah. And that's obviously like light mode in somewhere that's sunny. And that's the other thing as well. Is like, I want to be able to recommend an app to someone where it's literally just like, oh, send your money in, big button buy, big button sell, or big button send. And that's like all you have. Because at the end, or like maybe just DCA, and probably not DCA, because that's also another a term that some people might not understand, but something like buy every month. Yeah. And like kind of super, super simple. And I'm sure it'll come. Out of curiosity, did you manage to speak to Jack or mention that at all to him?
Jack Dorsey or Mallers?
Mallers.
I'm actually speaking to him on Friday night. So I will be, get my guns out and be ready to...
So
why dark mode? Why are you a dark mode maxi, Jack? I've not actually met him before because I didn't go to the Ghana conference. I couldn't afford to get across there. It's so expensive to fly into Africa And also, I'm a poor journalist, so
Because you're sending everyone your Bitcoin.
yeah, it's probably why. I've started to remedy that. I've literally started begging on Twitter, and I found that does actually replenish a lot of the Bitcoin that I give out. But when I think about like Senegal, literally, I must have given out like I must have set up at least 80 people with wallets, and every person I
Wow.
set up with a wallet with. Initially, I was giving out $10, and then Paco was like, "Mate, you need to calm down." Like, so I started giving out like $1 or $2 after that. But still, it like adds up, and yeah. But it's fun, and how else do we get adoption? And I can't code, so how else am I going to contribute to this ecosystem?
That brings me on lovely to one of my kind of final questions is obviously you learn about this tech, you're like, whoa, it's super cool. I want to kind of drive adoption. So kind of ranking levels at which your average Joe can kind of help contribute and drive adoption, like from beginner, intermediate to hard. What are some of the best ways do you think someone can go about that?
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's so personal and it's so specific for every person around the world. That they'll all have different touch points, different understandings of what money is, what they're doing with their money. They might even hate bringing up the word money. So Bitcoin is anything to anyone and everything to everyone as well. That's kind of weird, but I think that yeah, if I'm trying to introduce someone to Bitcoin, then I'll try to do it in a way that's applicable to them. For example, if it's my uncle who's in his 60s, or if it's someone that remembers the gold standard, then maybe you can talk about that. But if it's just or if it's a teenager, then why didn't you introduce them or try them a game of Bitcoin Bounce or Bitcoin Snake and be like, by the way, when I was your age, I was playing Snake, and now I can earn Sats from playing Snake. And then like, what are Sats? And like, oh, it's this in-game token, which by the way is also the best money known to mankind. And you go from there. So I think it's a real. I mean, for kids, read them Bitcoin books, for example. There's loads of really nice Bitcoin stories out there now, like Good Night Bitcoin or the Shamory books. There's even Bitcoin games. So I think it's just a question of getting your touch point across there. I mean, like my girlfriend, for example, terrible with numbers. I generally think that there is like a maths dyslexia thing out there, and this is not me being mean at all. She just does not get numbers, and but she gets Bitcoin on a sort of fiat versus Bitcoin understanding, and understanding that there's a supply cap, and that the number goes up eventually over time, and these sorts of things, and understands as well that the Lightning Network works way better than a PayPal or a Visa or a MasterCard. So it's no one is gonna. I mean, I can't get past page 5 of the white paper because I'm like, okay, this is now in Chinese to me. That's just how it is. So I think it's just understanding what those touch points are for that specific person you're talking to, and just trying to be like, okay, what are they going through right now, and what might Bitcoin fix for them? And always send them some Sats. Download Wallet of Satoshi or Moon or whatever your Lightning wallet is, and send it across. And then with regards to what can people do to contribute to the space, I heard someone recently say, do whatever you're doing in the world right now and put Bitcoin on top. And I thought that was really good advice, because that's kind of what I did. I was like a researcher, reporter, journalist sort of thing, and I've just started doing the same thing but in Bitcoin. And through doing it in a space that I really love and I really want to contribute to, it's become more of a mission-based activity. So my quality of life has gone up because I'm happier, and also I'm also way busier, which kind of like sucks a bit, but whatever. But I also, I get a lot more out of what I do. So if you are like orange pilled or whatever term you want to use, then think about what you're doing now and just be like, okay, well maybe I can do that in the Bitcoin space, because we are building a whole new economy here. And because it's a brand new Bitcoin economy, we need all the jobs we had in fiat, but just Bitcoinized. And there's definitely space for you, and lots of companies are hiring. So go on bitcoinerjobs.com and have a browse around. And if not, just send out feelers on email or Twitter, or go to conferences and just hang out with some of these people. Because if you are experiencing those sort of Bitcoiner thoughts that a lot of us go down, like those rabbit holes, then you're undoubtedly going to gel with these people on their level as well. I mean, a lot of people, Knut Svanholm, for example, talks about the fact that when you meet with Bitcoiners, you instantly hit it off, because you just go straight from small talk to being like, talking about long poles and spears, or how cars are great metaphors for Bitcoin adoption. So yeah, get stuck in, get involved, and life is short, and Bitcoin's fun. Come have fun.
Hmm. No, I mean, amazing advice, and I think it's a nice way of looking at it. Is just transfer your skills over. If you're, I mean, certain skills are easier than others, but even if you're, I don't know, you sell. My dad's a potter. I'll let you sell pots. You can just be like, oh, by the way, I accept Bitcoin or something. Or little things like that. I mean, I
Or
love like
start
Bitcoin stock.
making start yeah, or start I mean, I'm sure I would probably want a Bitcoin, like a handle on a mug that had a B on it.
I'm
Like
gonna
you
write
could
that down.
easily do like some Bitcoin themed pottery, and that would sell so well at any Bitcoin conference ever. And it's always like the perfect gift for it. I still need to drink out of a mug, and you saw at the start of this interview, my mug was too hot to hold. Well,
And
your
it's not even
dad,
orange.
yeah, it's not even ours. There you go. Your dad can make Bitcoin themed pottery. I mean,
Oh, so that is a tankard. That's not even a mug.
yeah, no, it literally says like beer festival on the front. Like, not the
Okay, so
sharpest.
I've got two questions left. Um, and so the first one's kind of like, you've obviously, life is short, you've thrown yourself at Bitcoin. What do you think your purpose is, or do you think about what would happen if, say, super hypothetical, Bitcoin doesn't live up to what it is? It feels like, oh no, something in the code was like built in so that it like turned off next year.
Yeah,
Where do you feel like that leaves you? Like, is that something you ever worry about? Yeah.
I used to a lot actually, and I was worried that I was making Bitcoin too much my identity and all this sort of thing. And I was like, there's a difference between because people go down the cult vibe a lot.
Mm.
So initially I was like, well, I'll just have to kill myself. That's the easiest way out. Like, there's, there's a bug in the code. Well, I'll just top myself. There we go. Sorted. No, I'm kidding. There's a lot more to my life than Bitcoin. It's just this thing that have a healthy obsession for. And I think it's good to have healthy obsessions in life. It does make life a bit more colourful and interesting. And I'm the first person to hold my hands up and realize, okay, yeah, I am a bit obsessed about this thing. What happens if there is an issue with it? Well, I've learned so much from it already, and it's humbled me. It's changed me because Bitcoin. You can't change Bitcoin. Bitcoin changes you. That I've already taken a lot from it, which I'm very grateful for. So I hope that I would take that energy and put it into other aspects of my life. With regards to going back to like a fiat life would kind of suck because there is that sense of hope and that sense of gravitating towards a better future through Bitcoin. So I would really hope that we would create a new one, or Satoshi would come back, or there might be some sort of better money, because I think fix the money, fix the world is quite true. And I think that we would have a more sort of fairer, equitable world under a Bitcoin standard. But yeah, it would be pretty tough. That would be the biggest, pill to swallow. They say that, the
Mm.
toughest pill to
No, that's
swallow is the
interesting.
orange pill.
But I guess it comes back to like your first point of transferring skills. Like the worst case is you've learned, you're not getting rid of your skills. If anything, you're sharpening them. You're learning more skills. Your skills are probably getting better because you're having to sell a new currency, which most of the world doesn't care about or want.
Yeah,
And so
true.
if you went back to the fiat, like, it'd probably quite easy because
Yeah.
selling anything after that or explaining anything would be a lot easier. And
I've
yeah,
become the
you're kind
biggest
of
Cardano shill. I'd just be
yeah.
there like Charles Hoskins. Yeah.
uh, and so kind of finally coming back to like you work for Cointelegraph,
Yes, sir.
and I know sometimes you get some stick because of
Do
that.
I?
Well, you did recently at a
That was a
what
bit silly.
conference was it?
Adopting Bitcoin in El Salvador. Yeah.
Yeah, that. And so how do you deal with that? But two, but what's the feel at Cointelegraph? Like, I don't know if there's like a Cointelegraph office or like somewhere you guys exist. Like,
It's
what are
decentralized.
your colleagues who also work there? Are they all of a similar mentality to you, or like how much of a disparity is it? And like, do you guys all just be like, oh, we obviously have super different opinions, but you still kind of like hang out or do things together, or is it you kind of just work on your own thing?
I mean, I mostly work on my own thing, and that comes across in my work, and I really respect that they give me that autonomy and they give me that freedom to focus on my own sort of beat, and my beat is definitely a Bitcoin beat. I mean, I thought that I'd kept this under wraps and that I hadn't sort of shown my crypto leaning towards Bitcoin until the editor in chief wished me happy birthday on Monday, and she was like, "Happy birthday to our in-house Bitcoin Optimus Maximus." I was like, "Oh shit, cat's out the bag there." And they've seen my Twitter and they tag me and stuff on Twitter as well. And it doesn't take a genius to realize that I'm not going to be writing about Ethereum anytime soon. And I'll only write about Ethereum if it's in the interest of Bitcoin. So like, moving from proof of work to proof of stake, I think super interesting. And I think it's one of those reasons why Bitcoin will survive and Ethereum won't, because proof of stake is just, fiat 2.0. You're giving lots of people an unfair advantage, and that's where the system gets abused, and that ultimately leads to more and more centralization. Whereas Bitcoin, as we know, is becoming more and more decentralized. But within Cointelegraph itself, I think I must be one of the only maxis. I think I've got suspicions about a couple of the guys on the American team who are pretty like wise and really informed when it comes to traditional markets and the crypto and Bitcoin markets. So I relate to a lot of what they say in their style of reporting, but I've been the one that's probably the more vocal with regards to like my views on crypto, and they don't seem to mind it. And I think if I was them and I was looking at managing Joe and being like, okay, you've got this reporter here that only wants to write about Bitcoin, or at least shows that he only wants to write about Bitcoin, how do we handle that? Well, there's no one else that's doing that, and he seems to be doing quite a good job of it. So maybe we should just let him keep doing that. And it certainly shows Cointelegraph to have a Bitcoin Telegraph side to it as well as a shitcoin Telegraph side to it. So I think that must be, well, this is hugely, I'm praising my own work here, but I would see that as being a useful tool. Like I would love it if I was the manager, the CEO of Cointelegraph, whatever, I'd be like, okay, I also want an Ethereum specialist, I want a Polygon specialist, I want a Matic specialist, whatever it is, because that's their beat. They want to write about shitcoins, and that's absolutely fine, and they're running a business based off of that. Because I don't think there are any other like sort of Bitcoin minimalists like me in the team. But also like kudos to them for letting me write about it and letting me be quite obvious with my framing of things. I've got headlines on Cointelegraph like "shit coins are garbage," or I try to keep up with all the Bitcoin developments and make sure they get out to the Cointelegraph audience, because I'm hoping that along the way I'm helping people be educated or informed or entertained about Bitcoin and what's going on in that space. So kudos to them. And also they've managed to keep their treasury under check across the bear market. So props for that as well, because a lot of crypto media companies have had a really bad bear market.
Well, yeah, it's kind of, I think it's Warren Buffett when he first took over Berkshire, they were a textiles company, I believe. Really? And that was like something like that. I was been reading his shareholder letters, but basically it was super cyclical, super volatile, and you basically just had to accept the fact that for large portions of the year, or sometimes a whole year, you're just not going to make any money. You're going to be at a loss, and you just have to focus on losing as little as you can. And then certain years it will come back into trend, you make loads of money, which is in the end why he then started branching out to investing the treasury and also taking on insurance companies, because he wanted to way of smoothing this out. But yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult being any sort of Bitcoin or crypto company, because you've got to keep a cool head and not pay loads of money to put your name on stadiums and then try and think, maybe I'll save a little bit of this up maybe, so that when it comes up, which I think Kraken does that quite well, to be fair. They seem to not really push it, hold the money back, and then which they can use to live off during, I guess, the more wintry periods. And so last question, you've got a focus for Bitcoin and not much else, as is quite evident. And so what gives you that focus, and what is your run your average person through your thinking as to how you've got to where you are?
So it's like there's a practical approach to it, which is that I want to become a specialist in an area, and I feel like Bitcoin is that area that will outlive us, and it'll be here in 100 years. There's also sort of an ethical approach to it, because I've worked for a few crypto companies now, and I remember being at DAP Radar, which is like a Web3 sort of business, and I came into work one day and they're saying, "Oh, have you done that project yet on whatever shitcoin it was?" And I was like, "No, I haven't quite finished." And he was like, "Oh, it's funny. I thought they would have rugged you by now." And I was like, "Oh, I don't really want to put my name on this anymore. I don't want to associate myself with any sort of company that could be a rug at some point, because I don't want that feeling of going to work and being responsible for someone losing money in some shape or form. And I want to be part of that. I want to be part of that sort of change towards self-custody and all that sort of thing. So I even try to steer clear of writing about Nexo or BlockFi or whatever, because I just don't want to appear to be supporting those sorts of things. Because I think, integrity and reputation is really, really important to build up and very easy to lose, as we see every couple of months in the crypto sphere. And the other part of it was, I think that Bitcoin was like a 0 to 1 moment, in that we discovered, or Satoshi innovated or discovered, digital scarcity. And once you've got that digital scarcity, it's very hard to then replicate that digital scarcity elsewhere. And well, then there's another part of it, which is what I mentioned earlier, which is that I think that every other chain is becoming more centralized, and like tried to make it out like they were decentralized, and then is becoming. Man, I can actually go on about this all day. I think there's lots of reasons why I only care about Bitcoin, but initially it was just sort of practical reasons. I mean, even like when you look at Ethereum and the fact that there's a pre-mine and people that, and they claim, I mean, Joseph Lubin is going around claiming that when they listed the first ETH tokens, there was no sense of it being worth anything, and there was no speculation about it. But in talks in 2014, he's literally saying whales should make private their disclosures of purchases of ETH, because they wouldn't want to change the market too much. And he mentions the word like speculation in it as well. So I think the whole thing was quite dishonest, and they knew that they were going to make a lot of money from it. Whereas Bitcoin, for the first 6 months of its existence, Satoshi didn't know if it was going to be worth anything. He was ridiculed to some extent by the cypherpunk emailing list, and people thought this is never going to work. DigiCash didn't work, Hashcash didn't work, eGold didn't work. So why would Bitcoin work? And because it had this sort of amazing sort of conception, or immaculate conception, as some people like to say, it really does put it a complete head and shoulders above any of these other crypto projects. So I think, if you're coming into the space and sort of learning about it for the first time, like start with Bitcoin at the very least. Okay, go and get rugged by other projects. We all get rugged. It's fine. It's going to happen. But I think you'll end up coming back to Bitcoin. And also, when you see all the cool stuff that's happening in the Bitcoin space, and you meet Bitcoiners in real life, and realize that they're thinking about their kids already, and they've got a lot of wisdom about them. And then I compare that to my experience at crypto conferences, when everyone just wants to sell stuff right now to you and get advertisement or marketing, whatever it is. It's a really different atmosphere. I'm not saying like Bitcoin is a purist, like there's loads of terrible Bitcoiners out there. It's for everyone after all. But I just think that has a lot of ingredients to be this real fundamental change to human existence. And I approach it through lots of sort of different hoops. But again, I'm not like a Bitcoin maximalist, because I don't really like that term. I'd call myself more of like a Bitcoin minimalist, i.e. I've got that in my life, and it's enough, and it's all encompassing, and I don't need to look at other things in as much detail, let's say. But I've tried to build dApps on Ethereum. I've tried to mine Doge. I've used lots of weird sort of CeFi and DeFi platforms. I'm still going to tinker with these things, but ultimately I wouldn't want to be paid in whatever shitcoin, and also when these tokens are being created, there's some sort of unfairness that's always created there. There's someone that's is benefiting unfairly, and I don't want to be part of that system, and I don't want my name to be associated with that system either. So that's a really roundabout way of approaching that question. I don't really have like a big sort of Saifedean Amus, like, bam, shitcoins are gonna poison everyone sort of thing.
No, I like that. It's very eloquently put. It's clearly something you've put a lot of thought into, and it's not just something that you've decided on a whim. And I think also, I mean, Saifedean has his way with words as well, but I think what you said is also quite relatable to your average person. Also, I think the idea of it just wanting to be your focus as well makes a lot of sense. Like, there are other areas which certain people are really excited about, and that can become your focus. But this is kind of more just why you've chosen your one. Thank you. So, Joe, where can people hear you chat more shit post, talk more wisdom, all this mixed into one? Where can we hear more of it?
Thanks, mate. No, it's lovely to chat to you and hang out, and I'm very much looking forward to the blockchain in a barn is it May? March? May?
Yeah, May.
It's going to be a lot of fun. So they can obviously catch me there. Chill. And that aside, my Twitter's at Joe Nakamoto. Nakamoto of Satoshi, of course, because we are all Satoshi. And my email address is joseph.hall@cointelegraph.com. If you want to send me a story or we can chat about something, then I'm there. And emails are open, DMs are open on Twitter as well. Always happy to chat about Bitcoin in particular. And hope people take something away from this, very happy you had me on, Tats, and it was really nice to chat to you. But I've got about 10 minutes of sunlight right now, and I haven't been outside, and the waves are currently pumping from where I'm sat. So I'm desperate to get in the sea.
All right, last question. How much time do you spend on Twitter?
Per day? Mate, I mean, some days 0, because I don't go on any internet or anything. I turn my phone.
You're immense. Like, I respect it so much, but I'm always like, oh my god, like Joe is bossing this platform right now.
Yeah, it's been a few days. My notifications are just. I mean, even just during this call, I've had 40 notifications. I just can't. It's horrible. I thought it'd be useful to have a Twitter profile for my job, and it opens up doors, which is true. But at the same time, it becomes a job in of itself, and I think people don't realize
leverage,
how much.
Especially once you've got to the following you have. I mean, it's kind of a rolling snowball, which you can use to direct wherever you want later on.
Yeah, I mean, on an average day, I mean, I'm a journalist. Journalists usually use Twitter for stories the whole time. So there's also that really bad sort of incentive to it as well. So I'd probably say about 4 hours a day, but maybe 6. It's bad. It's always open on my computer, put it that way.
That's immense. All right, King of Twitter.
Don't try this at home. Don't try this at home.
Don't go into pickup.
Yeah, that too. Don't.
It's been absolute pleasure talking to you, and I'll let you go catch some waves.
Thanks, mate. Yes, you too, Tats. Catch you soon in the UK, and all the best with the pod. And let me know how I can help out with the blockchain in the barn and anything else really.
Yeah,
you know where to find me.
Nice, absolute pleasure. I guess we'll call it that. We'll assume that it stopped recording now. So last question as well. Any also like just quick thoughts as well on my kind of general structure of a podcast, or thing that like anything that jumped out that you felt like I could have improved for when I record the next?
Can I genuinely think about this while in the sea and then like ring you in half an hour? Literally, the light goes so quickly here, and I haven't got outside.
Yeah, you can just DM it to me or something. Don't worry, we can have a chat whatever.
Or I'll call you or something later. But I really need to get outside.
Nice. I think you got my number through Signal, so I'll let you go.
Sick. Okay. Cheers, mate.
Nice.
Really enjoyed that, and lovely to hang out. I'll catch you in a bit.
Thanks so much to you as well. Good luck with the waves. See you.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
I hope you found that as informative and enjoyable as I did. And I just wanted to drop a quick reminder that we are holding a blockchain retreat in the west of Wales on the 11th to the 14th of May, where you'll find a sauna with a beautiful view of the sea, fresh food, yoga, breath work, and of course talks, panels and workshops by truly great speakers all about Bitcoin, blockchain and crypto. If you are interested, there are only 100 spaces, so please head over to our website at cowshed.org.uk, where you can register your interest so that you'll be notified when the remaining 85 tickets are released. That's all, and see you guys next week.